Dr. Graziel, welcome, and thank you very much for being on the show. I very much appreciate your time and feel very grateful to have the chance to talk to you today.
I'd like to thank you for this opportunity, Rida.
My most pleasure. Dr. Graziel, please let's start the conversation by a very simple question. Who is Dr. Graziel and what do you do?
Oh, that's interesting. So I'm a psychologist in Brazil, and I am currently working on a research, and I have been a clinical psychologist for 15 years already. So, and all this time also, involved in research, um, which involves behavior analysis and epigenetics now, besides neuroscience, that was the beginning of the research.
Very beautiful. Doctor, before I get into more details about behavioral analysis and the epigenetics, I would like to know why did you choose this field in particular and not something else?
This this field. So a little bit about the background, I think,
Yeah.
would be interesting. Well, let's go back there. I started in medical school. Actually, I don't know if that is the same for you guys, but in Brazil, we do have like different courses. You have psychology and you have medical school. So I got into the University of Medical School, and then I went into the university and studied for 3 years. And finally, I saw that I wouldn't like to go on with that profession to be a doctor. I would like to be a psychotherapist. I would like to work with psychology. And I dropped that university and went into the field of psychology. But at that point already, I was open, for any kind of approach in psychology. And soon I started to get interested in behavior analysis, but never left my interest about physiology, about medicine and neurology, psychiatry. It was something that was always there. And then during the course, I was studying behavior analysis. I went to the UK, had some courses there about behavior analysis with Dr. Mecca Chiesa. And then after that, I started studying neuroscience.
Very interesting.
And yes, and then I started to see that there was a gap in this um, joined knowledge from behavior analysis and neuroscience. My master's degree then came in, and I wrote about that. That was my dissertation. I wrote about this interface between neuroscience and behavior analysis. After that, I went into neuropsychology, and my PhD started to be done into this connection between behavior analysis and epigenetics. That was a new subject that came up. And that's it. I am here now studying that.
Fascinating. Doctor, can you please tell us what is the study of behavioral analysis? For example, why is it important for us to analyze the behavior of humans?
Yes. I think that the behavior of humans is something that is quite interesting. I think that many people get interested in that because we are psycho biosocial beings, and we need to understand each other, and we need to understand why uh, things happen the way that they do. We are the species that are conducting this world. At least that's what we believe. But of course, we need to understand that we also have this animal side. We are animals, and therefore we can never forget that we come from an evolution of species. And many of our behaviors are still instinctive, they are connected, they have physiological roots. So it is important that we understand that. And to do that, we also have to consider that the study of the behavior of animals is very important. So we need to understand that as a natural science, which is what behavior analysis is. It's a natural science that aims to understand behavior, and it aims also to give us tools to predict behavior. And that's where I think that I answer your question. The prediction of behavior is one of the good reasons why we can advocate for behavior analysis. because predicting behavior is something that helps us to construct a society, the society where we live. And that is something important, yes.
Correct me if I'm mistaken, but predicting behavior could be a way for us, for example, for leaders to set rules. Am I correct?
Yes, yes, of course. And obviously that it is used like that, you know.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say that it is like there is good or evil there, but there are many bad uses for that as well.
I would say it's just like a
Science is
tool.
neutral. Sorry?
I would say it's like a tool. It's like a bat.
Yeah.
You can either use it to hit a ball or hit someone.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely, exactly. Science itself, behavior analysis as a science, a natural science, it's a science, and as a science, it is neutral. There is no good or evil. We are just developing knowledge, you know. But the way that people apply it, and that becomes like applied behavior analysis, could be conducted, you know, in either way. So, as you said, you know, you can hit or you can defend yourself.
Doctor, from your expertise, what drives the human behavior? Why do we do what we do? What, let's say, lies beyond our behavior?
That's a deep question, you know, and of course that I'm going to defend what I actually believe. There are many ways of explaining that, and there are many approaches of explaining that. Psychoanalysis will tell you something about why people behave the way it is. Humanistic approaches will tell you something else, and behavior analysis will tell you something different. So I'm going to tell you what convinced me. While I was at university, I was listening to everything, but that's what convinced me. What behavior analysis says is that our behavior is selected by consequences. So that is the foundation of behavior analysis. It is actually following what is said, what was said in the theory of evolution. We have many behaviors are emitted. Some of them will be selected. They are emitted randomically, but they start to be selected because the environment will do that. So that is the basis of what we believe in behavior analysis. Basically, what we understand is that we do have this triad of behavior, consequence, and dissimulation. So that we work creating the repertoire that we develop along our lives. And that's all selected by consequences. So in three different levels, we have the phylogenic level, the ontogenic level, and the cultural one. So the phylogenic level was the one that selected the species for the behaviors for our species, what was important for our adaptation. The ontogenetic level is the one that selects the behavior that is from the individual. So it's more the area where psychology works because it is the environment that surrounds that individual specifically. And that is the kind of repertoire that he uses to deal with what is surrounding him specifically. But we also have a third level that will affect him somehow, that is the cultural level. And that includes everything that is cultural, all the agencies of the groups, you know, that will also play a role in this selection of behavior. And once selected, you compose this repertoire that is what you use to live in this world, to behave in this world, to defend yourself, to um, work, you know, and use that, you know, um, for everything that you believe that is necessary. And you start like, of course, making use of that. Some of them will be really adaptable for you, some of them will be not. So, and then we start having possible, likely, psychopathologies that will be a result of something that are not really well adapted.
Very interesting. Doctor, there's a question that I usually ask myself, and that is, why is it that as kids, we have the tendency to always, for example, connect with our parents? In a sense, let me paraphrase my question. Why is it so hard for us to oppose our parents as a point of authority and we always seek their validation?
That's a very nice question. That's a very good. Yes, of course. Then we're talking about human development here. And the thing about human development is something very interesting because it goes to a very deep point level of physiology. And things that we learn when we are children, they go deep inside because they are part of our biological formation. So we are developing, we are growing, and we are developing until our 20s, 24 years old actually, is when now we know that our adolescence finishes. And during all this time, especially the early ages of 0 to 6 years old, is where we're going to have the construction of our neural networks. Everything that was taught during this period is taken by us without a real judgment. It's just taken by us as the correct thing to be done. And that is usually the philosophy that our parents will preach. So when we grow older and we start seeing other things and developing this prefrontal cortex that will allow us to judge things, that's when we start, maybe we're going to start looking back and say, oh, maybe that was not as
Yeah.
correct as I thought, you know? But it is not what happens when we are growing because we are still developing and we are receiving only that information as the correct one and it's getting deep inside in ourselves, like really constructing our memories, really constructing our neurons. So it is hard for us to oppose that. It is certainly hard. You need to go through a process in your life so that you start looking back and saying, okay, let me put myself in their shoes and understand that they were only humans. And that is hard because our parents are not only humans. They are our parents. They are the ones that gave the rules and knew everything.
Very fascinating, actually. You know, in a way, in a
Mhm.
sense, it's somehow that we are being programmed up to a certain age, and that programming shapes our actions, behavior, unless,
Mhm.
as you mentioned, we go through a life-changing experience where
Mhm.
we start questioning and try to
Yeah.
break off and build our own ideas, our own thoughts and methodologies, in a sense.
Mhm. Yes, exactly.
Speaking of methodologies, as a
Mhm.
behavior analyst,
Mhm.
what are, let's say, the strategies that you take to read the behavior of someone? How do you approach?
Mhm. That's is interesting as well. Yes. The thing about behavior analysis that it is based on a philosophy called radical behaviorism. So that was not a theory; it was a science that behavior analysis became a science based on these concepts that B.F. Skinner preached at one point. So he taught us, he gave us these ideas, all based on these views of selection by consequence, as I told you. And he gave us some tools to understand and to start creating this behavior analysis science. Uh, and of course, we have some branches into that. We have experimental behavior analysis, we have applied behavior analysis. So, what I'm going to do to tell you is like the general methodology of how we understand behavior analysis. It's not only the experimental or the clinical, which are totally different. So in the experimental behavior analysis, we can manipulate things in the lab. We can manipulate the mice or the pigeons or the animals that we can use there in order to understand behavior. But of course, that doesn't apply to clinical behavior analysis. So, but the principles are the same. There is one thing that is quite important. I would say that it is the originality of behavior analysis. Um, it doesn't work with preset labels of psychopathologies or any other approaches. It gives the individual and any kind of individual the chance of having the behavior described. So description of behavior is our best tool. We call it functional behavior analysis, and that's what we do. It really doesn't matter for us whether if the behavior has one or the other shape. That's what other approaches would focus on. What matters is what function does it have in this person's repertoire. You see? So it could be really bizarre, but our focus is to understand, not to adapt that just to the society or to what other people do. It is to understand what is the function of this behavior for this person, for this individual. And maybe it has given him the basis of the repertoire that he needs to survive this world, to adapt to this world. And it's not for us to judge that this is not functional for us, for our society, for our standards. So that is one thing that is really interesting about behavior analysis. It's description of behavior. That's functional behavior analysis. And it is our best tool in terms of methodology.
Very beautiful. Doctor, something that usually fascinates me is what goes in the mind of, let's say, psychopaths, criminals, and people with unorthodox, let's say, ways of behavior. Because sometimes I think of it, it's like the newspaper. No one would be interested in reading the newspaper if it's only just good news, because everybody expects it to be good news. So we get usually attached more to bad news. We want to know more about it.
Yeah.
So what lies beyond the brains of people who oppose the rules and the laws to benefit their desires, let's say?
Yes, exactly. Right, I'm going to answer just comment on the first thing. Why people also seem to be more attracted to the bad news and to the negative things, before the positive things, and that is explained by evolution. In our evolution, what happened was that as animals, we needed to protect ourselves before we had pleasure with things. So running from predators, knowing the threats that were surrounding us, and getting food to survive was more important than having pleasure. So pleasure comes secondly. So when we talk about reinforcement, and that is one of the principles of behavior analysis, we know that getting to fight our fears and get protected, physically protected, was more important than having the pleasure, the reinforcement, positive reinforcement with things, rewards. So it developed in our history of evolution, it developed later. And then that's why we are more prepared, our brain is more prepared to focus on the threats, to focus on what causes fear, because first we need to provide shelter, we need to provide survival. And after that, we're going to, okay, I'm going to now read about a trip that I can take, something that I can get to know about, things that make me happy. So it seems that this is still at the back of our minds, and it is an unconscious choice that we have, instinctive one. So that is an interesting point about that. But now going back to what you asked about these criminal minds, if we evaluate that, and I'm not trying to give any apologies, okay, that's how they behave, and that's okay. What I told you about functional behavior analysis, that we try to understand the function, the role of the behavior, is because that's how we understand it scientifically. And then, of course, it will be applied like, okay, but is it something that adapts? Is it something that steals the rights of other people, this kind of behavior? So then we start like going to a level of judgment. But before that, we just have to analyze that scientifically. And when we talk about criminals, what happens is that they developed a repertoire of defense, of avoidance, of attacking that somehow worked for them. So they were able to get rewards, they were able to create this operant behavior with things that are considered illegal and things that are not okay, or obviously, but they were able to get these rewards by doing that. And this behavior was repeated. And so they learned, there was some learning, very strong learning, that if they did that, they would get what they wanted. We are born as humans that are essentially selfish. Babies are not they are cute, but they are selfish
I was
because they
going to
want
ask you
to
that
be.
question actually.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay.
I wanted to
So
ask you a question, but I'm going to ask you after.
okay, very good then. Yes. So as selfish human beings, babies they need to look for anything that provides them with survival. And then what happens is that this is the reason why they cry. This is the reason why they ask for attention, because they need attention to protect the existence.
Mhm.
And they will continue doing that until we start teaching them that we live in a society, and that instead of taking things as we want for our survival, we learn how to negotiate. We learn how to do things in a different way. We learn about morals. We learn that we cannot do to another person what we don't want for ourselves. But sometimes people don't learn these limits. And that is something that, okay, they keep thinking that they could just keep doing whatever they want, that they thought that would be the right thing to do, and that shapes in everything, not only the repertoire, but it shapes the brain. There are some parts of the brains of the criminals that we have studies that analyze that. So the amygdala is smaller. Some other parts of the networks, that are constructed during this time also. So the development of the whole brain is totally different. So it reaches a physiological point. It's not only behavior that can be changed. It is there in their networks. They have learned that so deeply and so intrinsically that it is in there under the skin. They will keep doing that so much that some of them really, we cannot say that there is a way we can revert this repertoire.
Doctor, how can I link this behavior of humans being selfish evolutionarily? Can I say, for example, that we are selfish because we want what's best for us so we can spread our genes later on?
Yes, exactly. There isn't this concept of knowing exactly what's better for us, because if you ask a baby, the baby cannot say, okay, this is better for me. This is really instinctive. It's from the species. Like we thrive for life. This is something that is in our genes and all the animals' genes. So we need to look for that. We need to secure that before anything, so that yes, we can become a species that will pass on the genes and will continue. So this fight for life is a fascinating thing that is inside all of us. It's not what we know for sure, that it's not natural that someone desires the death. So life is something that all beings, all alive beings will look for. That is unconscious. We fight for our lives all the time. So yes.
Somehow it's like the hidden power which drives all, let's say, living things. Because even animals,
Mhm.
they have that instinct. Everyone has the instinct to
Mhm.
spread the genes and protect. It feels like
Mhm.
it's the power that moves or
Mhm.
shapes our behavior somehow. The question
Mhm.
that I wanted to ask, Doctor, are humans in nature good or bad?
That's super interesting. Yes, I think that's a question that we always ask ourselves, and I don't know if we can use in nature, if we could use any of those concepts, good or bad. I think that this judgment is not possible. When we talk about the essence of the human being, what we know is that we thrive for life, and from that, we could have some kinds of repertoires that later on, just later on, will be judged by humans as good or bad. But in essence, there isn't this division, you know. People are not born like good or bad. They are born and they will thrive for life. The way that they will do that, that is something different.
Beautiful. Doctor, with the rise of technology, social media, and all this, let's say, ways of maybe it's a tool for us to connect more, though the rates of anxiety, depression, and loneliness are skyrocketing. So why isn't that reflecting positively on us as humans, although in theory we are more exposed?
Well, what seems to be happening right at first, I think that the development of technology for us has gotten to a speed that is not actually following our biology. So our biological equipment is not at the same rate, at the same speed. So there is a gap there. We are not being able to deal with so much data and so much speed of processing that we should have, and we actually don't have to deal with that. So it's causing lots of burnouts. You didn't mention burnouts, but it is one of the things that is happening as well. So it's a lot of information, including social information, social media, these things. So the thing about specifically social media is that it deals with one side of ours, that is emotions. Socialization is dealt with emotions, and it is a more instinctive part of our brains. It is not our cortex that will deal with cognitive information, that is up there. It deals with our emotions, and it certainly, at one speed that destroys a life in one day and constructs a life in one day. So it is very hard for us to deal with all that information. And then there's another thing that I would say about the social media and what you mentioned about the levels of anxiety and all other psychopathologies that we have had. The point about that is we do need some basic things about behavior, around people's social behavior, that need to be there in order to shape our brains. And by that, I mean social contact, but we do need, for example, touch. Touch is very important for our development. And we are just lacking that. Social media has put us in a virtual world, and we do not have this physical contact anymore with people. So that kind of isolation is not actually, helping us to build up this part of connections between our limbic system and our cortex. We're just like skipping to our cortex straight away. So this connection that is made by, when mothers they hug their children, they squeeze their children, they kiss their children, and we think, no, that's so nice, but she's doing that because it is nice for her. It's not only nice for her. Babies need that. And we know that because their learning depends on that kind of touch. So that is something that is really necessary. And from that, you can understand how important touch is for the human being. So touching, looking in the eyes, constructing these connections that are physical, this is important for us. We are made for that, and that isolation that is provoked by the social media, not only social media, digital and social media, obviously, is not helping with that. Certainly not, especially in this moment of our lives that we need, like from the zero age until 20s, we need to have this touch to build up these networks. So we are coming to this world, they are finishing this adolescence, and this equipment is not prepared, well equipped, for what they will need to face in terms of the connection between the emotions and how you understand your emotions, how you connect them to the other cognitive functions. So it seems that there is a gap, and into this gap, there is a lot of space for anxiety, for example. Because
Commenting on
anxiety is another
your,
phase of fear.
yeah, doctor, commenting on your point of the mother touching, hugging, and let's say showing emotions and a physical connection with a child, in a sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
From what I read, from what I understood, is that, let's say, children who lack the mother's touch, or let's say the love, in a sense, grow
Mm-hmm.
not knowing how to differentiate emotions. So these are the
Mm-hmm.
people who
Yes.
usually end up like being more emotionally damaged, and they don't know how to differentiate their emotions. So commenting on your point that touch, physical touch, plays a role in us understanding,
Mm-hmm.
let's say, the emotions.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. Not only understanding emotions, learning how to express emotions, and also that is a part of learning really that we need to use connected to verbal behavior is to label emotions, because there are many times that we feel things, we feel anxiety, we feel fear, but we don't know what it is. So that's one of the things that sometimes we receive children, and that really counts like children that are 5, 6 years old, 7 years old, having panic crisis, having anxiety crisis, but they don't know the names of the feelings.
Yeah,
So that's one of the clinical approaches we have to use. Okay, let's learn what is fear, what is sadness, what is happiness. But they really don't learn that. So that is really necessary. I was going to comment with you. I don't know if we have time with that, but
sure.
I told you that I study epigenetics,
Yes.
and the first studies about epigenetics. You understand a little bit about what epigenetics is, about the methylation of the
Uh,
genes, and
Please, let's like give it like a definition for those who don't know. Let's assume that nobody knows, and for them to get introduced to it.
okay, let's go on with that. So we're born with a set of genes, and everyone has their individual set, which makes you like equipped to give orders to your body and to yourself to understand what to do, to construct the organs and all the different proteins that need to be produced in order that you are the way you are. The thing about it is that even though we have all this set of genes that is prepared and will never change, including the mutations, including everything that you have, not all of them will be turned on and off.
Mhm.
So we have what we call activation of genes and silencing of genes. So some genes are there, they are silenced. This is how we understand, for example, some people that have researched about their genotype and they learn that they have some genes for cancer, but the doctor will tell them, maybe you will not develop that because maybe, these parts of these genes will not be activated. And that depends a lot on what your lifestyle is and many things that will be along with that. So that is what epigenetic is. It is the this turning on and off of genes. Which ones are going to be silenced? Which ones are going to be activated?
Activated.
And yes, activated. So the reason for that, why does it happen to us and all the alive beings? It's because we have a gap between the genotype that we were born with and the environment that we are coming to. And it's not always for sure that this genotype is actually really adapted to the environment that we are going there. So we needed to have some kind of negotiation here, and we needed to activate or silence the genes that will really promote the adaptation to the environment that we are living in.
Uh-huh.
So that's how we are going to mold our epigenotype. So actually what we are is our phenotype, what makes us what we are, including behavior, has to do with that. Okay, the
Wow.
environment that you grew up required you to activate some genes and to silence others.
Mhm.
So we need to see, what this adaptation was. And sometimes there are bad adaptations because sometimes you had like the activation of some genes that were not necessary. So I'm going to tell you about one of the first studies
Please.
about epigenetics. It happened right after, not right after, but some years after the Second World War. And it happened when some women that were taken into Holland, in the Netherlands, from Germany and Poland. They stayed there and they were pregnant, these women, and it was a group of pregnant women, and they were suffering hunger, famine, really famine. So it's called the Dutch famine. And these kids were born during the war. But 30 years later, around that, 30 years later, there was a study that tried to understand, what happened to these people that were babies, that were fetus during the war. And what happened is that something like, I don't remember exactly the names, but most of these people, it was a huge number, were obese.
Mhm.
And that was something that called attention because they were like, oh, but what happened? Most of the women were going through famine, real famine. They had absolutely no food. And now these kids are born and become adults that are obese. And that's when we started to study, okay, their genes were activated to store food because the environment in the uterus, in the womb, was telling them that they were going to an environment that there was no food.
Wow.
That message was going through, and then they became obese. So that was one case. Then in my master's degree, I studied about this connection between mothers and children. But we studied with animals, so I collected some studies about fostered adoption of mice. So what happened is that we have some mice, and they are divided into two categories, what we call bad mothers and good mothers. We use the labels, but we have behavior to explain.
Uh-huh.
So bad mothers are usually defined as the ones that they breastfeed their pups,
Children.
and yes, they breastfeed them and they leak them during breastfeeding, and they do what they call arched back breastfeeding. So they will do like that. They will
Mhm.
just like hug their pups, and they leak them. When they are doing that, these are the good mothers. I'm sorry. Bad mothers will not do that. They don't have this arched back breastfeeding, so they will do something like this. They don't touch the pups, and they will have this approach of not licking them, so they keep very far. And then after that, what happens is that in this study, we intercross these them that was these pups that were born, and the ones that were born from the good mother are fostered by the bad mother, and the opposite. And the funny thing that we see is that even though the ones that were born with the genes that were from the good mother but fostered by the bad mother, they started developing behaviors of anxiety.
Wow.
Yes. And the opposite also happened. The ones that were born from the bad mother but were fostered by the good mother started to have behaviors that controlled the anxiety. They took a
Wow.
very long time to activate their APA axis. So, the APA axis, the hypothalamus and pituitary and adrenal. So, that is the stress axis that we have in our brain and body. So, it was activated long before, which gave them time to calm down and to do what we gave them as a task. The task was to run through a maze.
Mhm.
It required memory, it required learning of the maze. So, what happened is that the ones that were anxious, they could not go through the maze, they could not learn. And the ones that were fostered by the good mothers, although they had the genes from the bad mother, they were able to calm down. They took a long time to create this cycle of the HPA axis, and they could go through the maze and they could learn the maze.
Very
So we see,
fascinating.
yes, it was very interesting how we do that. And of course, my PhD research now is about that, but it's with humans. Obviously, that we're not doing these things. Please don't think about it. But we work with children from shelters that really had like traumatic experiences, and we are trying to evaluate what the results in the epigenes are. So we're going to see if that affects them in their stress response and if it really has some connection with the methylation of the genes that would activate this area, to find this environment that is hostile, that is adverse for them. I don't know
Doctor,
if it was clear.
yeah, it is clear actually, and it's very beautiful and fascinating. I have a question. Now we are talking about pups, let's say at a certain age where the environment affects their behavior and how they grow, let's say.
Mhm.
Can we apply the same for adults? Meaning, changing the environment, does it have a
Mhm.
role in activating or suppressing the genes even later on in the future? Or is that it
Mhm.
as we are kids?
I just missed the first part of your question. You just got cut off. Can you
Yeah,
repeat it?
I'll repeat it, sure. So we mentioned that the pups,
Mhm.
the environment which they grow in, it
Yes.
determines the activation of the genes, whether they're going to grow with anxiety, happy, and so on. Can
Mhm.
also the environment affect adults in activating
Ah,
or
yes.
suppressing their genes?
Mhm.
Or do we reach like a certain
Yes.
age and that's it?
Oh no. Actually, epigenetics, like the activation of the genes or silence of the genes, is a constant and very, very dynamic movement, and it has to be because we need to be adaptable. So we need to have our genes going with us, and our body needs to adapt. So it has to go like that all through our lives. So the thinking is that, and so these things change. If you change your environment, you start activating other genes and silencing others because those are not necessary anymore. So it is something that happens. The point is, Rita, of course, that our body, as we get older, loses a little bit of this neuroplasticity,
Cool.
you know. So how many genes will be there, to be activated or silenced? It gets like less and less, as the years are going. So this neuroplasticity, the proteins that will be produced, the result of that, that will be something that will be a bit different as we grow older. Our telomeres are getting shorter in our genes. So it means that we don't have all those genes again. So if you had some genes that need to be silenced or activated, but it's gone because you're getting old. So your telomeres, are really getting shortened. So your chances are fewer. But yes, they still happen until the last day of our lives.
Doctor, do our genes get affected only via behavior and environment? In a sense, does, let's say, the stress levels affected, food, sleeping, all those other factors, do they affect it?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. It is something that is extremely interesting, to think. Because, when we're talking about exercise, it's behavior, you know.
Mhm.
Diet is something that you give the substance, the elements for our genes to construct, the parts of the proteins that they need. So you might have a message from your genes that you need to produce certain kinds of proteins, but you are not ingesting the elements the amino acids that will compose this protein. So the message is there, but your body doesn't have the elements to construct this protein, so it's going to be missing. And I'm going to give you one example that I find it very interesting. Uh, we already know that our gut is extremely important for our health. And now we have been studying what the relationship between our gut and mental health
True.
is. Yes. And epigenetics is all there. It's absolutely all there because all these changes that happen in your body because you are activating or you are silencing some genes, they will be related to what you are getting inside your body. So one of the things, for example, uh, the fact that we eat a lot of industrialized food, a lot of chemicals that were not part of our diet some decades ago, these things will bring the activation of inflammations. So we have low cytokines that will be activated, and it will make this environment in our gut extremely inflamed. And then what happens? For example, I'm just going to give you one example of depression, and it is a very plain example. So please understand that this has lots of other things that might be happening. But how can you produce serotonin if you do not have serotonin is a neurotransmitter related to depression? So how can you produce that if you do not have the basic elements in your diet that should be absorbed and transformed into tryptophan and into serotonin? So you need to compose that. But the thing is that maybe you do, because people will say, but I eat a lot of chocolate, chocolate has tryptophan, so I'm going to produce that. But the thing is that your intestine, your gut, is absolutely inflamed.
Yeah.
So it will not absorb any of the tryptophan that you are eating.
Because of the sugar.
It's just going to, yes, and the sugar that you are putting there is making this inflammation even worse, and is going to prevent you from absorb the tryptophan. So this tryptophan will not be part of the neurotransmitter that you need to produce to fight depression. Are there genes that give you this tendency? You were born with the genes with a tendency of a very low production of serotonin. Yes, there are. But if you, on the top of that, you also put the situation that your intestine is really inflamed and you can't absorb the tryptophan, yes, things are going to be much worse. And even the medication, if you start using the medication, then you might also have the problem of absorbing it all, and you have to increase the doses of that, and the diet is not helping because it's still inflamed. So you get in a cycle that your body is not being able to fight and to help you.
Doctor, something crossed my mind now, like combining what we spoke about. So we discussed and we mentioned that we as humans want to spread our genes. So we want what's best for our bodies. We want to stay healthy and so on. So why is it that the mind always wants to put us into our comfort zone? Meaning, why is it hard for some people to start training and doing things which might be painful, though they would have a better effect later on? So the question is, why is it hard to do tiring things, although they are better for our genes?
Yes. Well, then you need to start thinking about one skill that is self-control. So that is what we call one of the executive skills that we have. This executive, I don't know if you heard about that, but probably, our executive skills, they are in this prefrontal cortex.
Yeah.
So that was one of the latest parts of our evolution. We started evolving the prefrontal cortex a long time before we had evolved all the other parts of our body. So much that you could see, like our colleagues, Neanderthals, Australopithecus, for example, they had like a kind of a very not plain, like that straight. Yes, it was really inclinated because they didn't have the prefrontal cortex. So what we conclude, right, is that these executive functions that will be self-control, this ability of holding for some kind of pleasure or reward that comes later on, organization, planning, self-motivation, all these very high graded abilities that are not basic, they are a secondary kind of abilities, they are in this prefrontal cortex. We are born only with the ability of develop the prefrontal cortex, but not with that completely shaped. So human beings depend a lot on their carers to develop, to continue developing until their 20s. And part of this development, a huge part of that, is the prefrontal cortex and executive skills. So we're going to be teaching kids about inhibitory control, okay, now you stop. You don't go like over and over, all over the walls and over the tables. You now have to stop, sit. This is self-control at the end. It starts with inhibitory control and then becomes self-control, and it becomes metacognition, and you can be conscious about that. So that is something that you need to develop with kids. First thing is, it's hard because it is something that needs to be taught, and it's not our primary behavior. So our primary behavior, more instinctive behavior, is to get the reward straight away. It's not something that's like, oh, wait, okay, I'm gonna have to wait for 1 year to 3 months training. No, that's too much, I think that we're gonna eat that cake because that's right now.
Exactly.
It's a more primitive behavior. Yes. So these things, self-control, self-motivation, needs to be taught, and you need to learn how to control time. You need to understand that it will take some time, but the benefits will be very good. That is hard for our brains to learn. Some people will have some deficiency in some reward neurotransmitters, like dopamine, for example. That is even harder for them. And they have, for example, ADHD is one of the disorders that has a lack of dopamine in the synaptic gap. So they will have 5 times more chances of getting into addictions that is pleasure at the moment in a short time than taking a long time and have this commitment, for a long time. They will go straight away for what brings them pleasure at that moment.
What
so
a
that's
beautiful
the thing
analysis.
about it. Sorry?
I'm saying, what a beautiful analysis for the question.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes, that's interesting. So that's, at the end of the day, we need to develop these executive skills, and that requires a lot of training, a lot of teaching, and obviously that giving children access to things that give them immediate pleasure, that give them immediate solutions, and not allowing them to construct the way is not helping, obviously, because that if that needs to be taught, it needs to be taught that there is a way to construct things. Things don't come because you do that, because you click on the screen of the cell phone. So you see how things connect. At the end of the day, you're going to have this individual that learned it. Well, no, I just have to click. And then how do you come here and tell me that I have to go to the gym and practice every day? No, it's just so
I don't want
easy.
that. You just reminded me of the marshmallow experiment.
Yes, the marshmallow experiment.
Exactly the same.
Yeah, yes, exactly. That is a wonderful experience with kids, and exactly the same. Yes, the reward, like, and some of them they say, no, I'll have just one, but I will have it now.
One is enough.
Yes, exactly.
Dr. Graziel, I can't thank you enough for this conversation. Is there anything that you would like to end up the conversation with? Anything that you would like to share from your side before we close up the episode?
I think that we covered it well. I hope that there isn't any misunderstanding about behavior analysis, and because it's something that concerns me sometimes. I think that there was, a media going on and was crucifying behavior analysis. So I
Why?
hope that yes, it was something that. Some movies I think that helped with that, right? If you get, like, for example, Clockwise Orange, that was a movie that really like portrayed behavior analysis, a technique used in law enforcement to make people believe that oh, behavior analysts, that's what they do, they punish people like that, or they have like this conditioning systems that we use these images and change the behavior at any cost. And that's absolutely not what behavior analysis is. On the opposite, it's a very non-labeled science, and that uses, as I told you, descriptivism as a very original way of describing behavior without any kind of preconcept.
Very beautiful. Dr. Graziel, thank you very much. And I wish you all the best. Nothing but happiness for you and your family. And I wish to
thank you so
have the
much.
chance to talk to you in the future, maybe. Until then.
Sure.
Thank you so
Yes.
much.
It was very nice to talk to you and to have this opportunity, Rita. Yes, it was very good. Thank you for
Thank
that.
you very much, doctor. You have a wonderful rest of the day.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Ciao. Bye-bye.
Ciao.